Housing strategy is another essential of a complete plan. And the same old thing, there are some things that need to be paid attention to, and they're summarized here. So in Portland's downtown, those services, the housing is connected to the services. The one in the upper left is the Pearl District. The ones down in the lower right are the old South Auditorium project and the South Waterfront. But they are connected into the downtown with the streetcar system. An example of that, the Pearl District, here it is in 1995 on the left, and it was an old rail yard, and that's an elevated viaduct where you see that green arrow. And here it is in 2003, and if we took a shot today, that we'd have a lot more development. But it's been developed as a mixed-use area, but primarily for housing. And so it has those services that you need in a neighborhood. It has the grocery store. It has the open space, and some of that open space is passive, and some of it is very active and child-friendly. And there is a mix of housing, affordable housing, where you see the purple, market rate rentals, the light blue, and market rate condos with the very dark blue. And so when you look at the mix here, the affordable buildings are 5, market rate 20 out of the 25. About 20% are affordable. The interesting thing here is that a low-income housing ghetto is not being created. It's hard to distinguish the affordable housing from the market rate housing, and it's really a wonderful integration. And this is really the model for how lower income people, affordable housing, can be incorporated then into our cities in this kind of mixed situation. And so here would be an affordable building. Here's a market rate rental. These are fairly high density, of course. There's a market rate condominium. That whole district is pedestrian bike friendly, because when you get those kinds of densities, you need to provide amenities to compensate for that density, and so it's pedestrian bike friendly, and you have a look at some of the open space, and basically it's also very child friendly. So housing strategy, and how can that be integrated then into your downtown plan? The other essentials would be an employment strategy, because you want those work trips in your downtown. And like a housing neighborhood, employment neighborhoods have certain requirements, and some of those requirements are summarized here. In Portland, it happened, the employment sites really were along the bus transit mall on the 2 streets you see there, extending 11 blocks in the downtown. I talked to a developer after the transit mall was built, and he said there is only one place to be in Portland, in the downtown, and it is on the transit mall. And I said, well, why is that? He said, because it has high visibility, everyone knows where the mall is, and many of my employees will be coming by transit. And if I'm looking for the very best employees, I will have an edge on the employers who are not adjacent to transit. And so that is where the development started to concentrate in the downtown. That is that spine. You can see the transit mall then running in the opposite direction. We're now at the north looking south. And you can see the anchor structure then on the north end of the mall, one of the big office buildings, and on the other end, and a couple of other big office buildings as well. And so those great employment sites continue to be then along the transit mall, where you see that magenta color, which is a government center, a concentration of government uses. Portland State University, served by the streetcar. And there are other kinds of employment. I thought I'd throw this in, even though this really doesn't work in your downtown. It often works on the edge of the downtown, because many communities say, well, we need research and development sites. They're going way out to the suburbs. We'd like them adjacent to our downtown or in our downtown. And these kinds of uses require big sites, and this is Centennial Campus in Raleigh, North Carolina, or certainly your Microsoft campus. And so this is in Lincoln, Nebraska, and this is adjacent to the downtown. where we identified R&D sites that would complement the downtown. And these are a couple of different sites. And the idea was to do a capacity diagram. Could we get the critical mass we need for that research and development synergy that they like to see? Because these are neighborhoods. R&D does not like to be located out, away, alone. They prefer to be with other R&D in that kind of a neighborhood. And so employment strategy is an essential. And finally, the implementation strategy, which is most essential. It has certain requirements as well. It has those game changers we talked about. It has a dependable funding source, dependable in that urban renewal and tax increment financing is one of the best sources, and you have some variations of that in your state. And then you need strategic public investment, and you can read the rest of the way around that circle. And so when we went to Racine in 1999, this was kind of the character of the downtown. And we said, if you do this, you create this game changer that you see right here, the set of our park blocks, we will induce market demand. We will attract development into the downtown that was not there before, because they'll want to be next to this amenity and everything else that the downtown has to offer. And so that was it, the game changer. And we said those green arrows will all happen if you spend $3 million on the yellow arrow. And we gave them a schedule for doing that. Now this is all about momentum. And so the schedule was for the first 120 days, 6 to 12 months. Because if you don't see things happening almost immediately, it will never happen. And so this is an article in the paper. How did we do? First 120 days. They were doing great. And a year. And then this kind of article in the New York Times. So that was the game changer. These other developments followed. This is their Monument Square, which we designed after those park blocks. A corporate headquarters, an art museum, and another game changer at the end of the retail street, where you see that green arrow on the left, the development we said should follow on the right, and here it is, that mixed-use development then was built. They used tax credits, housing tax credits, to finance that project. And I was talking to the developer at the groundbreaking, and I said to him, "Why are you here in Racine?" He was out of Milwaukee, and he said, "I'm here because this is the only town in Wisconsin that has decided what it wants to be when it grows up." And that's what you call inducing market demand. So the public catalyst was about $5 million, about $600 million in private investment then followed. And so these are the kinds of ratios we like to see. Basically, if for every $1 of public money, if you can stimulate $7 of private, you can make the numbers work. And of course, this is much better than that. But these are the kinds of numbers one wants to see. On the east side of Portland, the Lloyd District, the public catalyst costs about $15 million, and that number of private investment now is over $1 billion. In Knoxville, Tennessee, $60 million, $900 million, and in a small community, a smaller community, Springfield, the public catalyst will be $4 million, and the private investment that it will stimulate will be about $81 million. This is a very interesting one. This is Medford, Oregon, and it is in what you see on the left is basically a bunch of, if you could look at an aerial of that today, it would be a bunch of parking lots. And the city said, and the parking lots and used car lots, and the used car dealer was moving out of town. And the city said, "What do we do with it?" And we said, "This is what you do with it, and if you build this public investment, these park blocks, the private investment will follow." A private investor looked at it and said, "Okay," to the city, "if you will build those, we will put our headquarters adjacent to the park blocks, and by the way, you don't have the urban renewal money yet, so we will even build the park blocks, and then you can pay us back out of the tax revenues we will be generating. So that project is underway right now. Now in Portland, the funding comes from these sources. We thought you might be interested in it. Tax increment funds, and this is for public investment. Tax increment about 83% of the dollars they spend. City General Fund about 3%. The authorized indebtedness now is, you can see, a couple of $1 billion. The indebtedness that they have taken out against that is about $1 billion, and the remaining debt capacity, they have all kinds of remaining debt capacity, over $1 billion. The caution is this: silver bullets. These are public actions that have a negative impact on community. And everywhere we go, we find there are silver bullets. And for instance, here's some cities and here's some projects, and they have negative impacts. Sometimes they're political, sometimes they're financial. What happens, someone has an idea and they say, boy, if we do this, we're going to turn everything around, and they end up being a drain on the public coffers, or they become a political embarrassment. And then you see this last one, this everywhere market studies. The negative impacts are financial, in that the market studies are usually done in the abstract without a plan, and consequently have no real content to them that can be used by the cities. So silver bullets, standalone projects dreamed up by someone that aren't part of a larger strategy, are to be avoided. Substantial public support is always important. That systematic process is important. And so here's Fairbanks, Alaska, population of 35,000. Those red dots indicate key public meetings with the public during the process, and each one of those vertical bars might be a month. But anyway, so you can see there is a process on the left, and basically 4 big public events. Olympia, Washington, you would probably do the same kind of thing if you had a plan. Here's Springfield, Oregon. This is their schedule. These are their public events. Santa Fe, New Mexico, 4 public events. Knoxville, Tennessee, even with a population of 180,000, 6 public events. And Lincoln, biggest still, 260, with 4 public events. So it is systematic, and it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Another essential is a representative opinion sampling, and because public involvement is often misdirected and not well used. Public involvement is a precious community resource, needs to be respected, and the public needs to feel that they are being heard and that what they're telling you is being used. And so we use these traditional, whether it's a tweet or a Facebook, or in Pittsburgh it had to do with a special website. We have used kiosks, we have used newspapers, which have gone out to everyone in the community. We have had exhibits at art museums, but the key ones are the stakeholder meetings, where you meet with the people who are really interested in the downtown, who will be the constituency for carrying the plan forward. It includes a workshop or walking out on the street to look at what's going on. That's my partner on the left, drawing with chalk in the pavement. But the main event is the workshop, typically where there is a presentation which is educational, and in a workshop which follows. You cannot ask people to give you good feedback unless you educate them about the consequences of whatever it is that's being proposed. So the educational piece is always important. And for example, this would be a typical public workshop, and this was in Lincoln, Nebraska. A cost-effective outreach is important, and public participation has been blown out of control in this country. In just about every community, more money is spent than is necessary, and the results are often poorly used. And to give you an example, in 1999, Mayor Katz had a vision plan, and these are the results. And basically we say everyone wants good schools, clean water, safe streets, and clean air. Then in 2000, none of that information was used in the community. 2008, Mayor Potter came along and said, let's do another vision. And you can see 21,000 pages of data, 300-page report. That one cost us about $1.5 million, or about $122 per respondent. None of that information was used. And Mayor Adams now is doing his own visioning process. And so it's just a caution. One has to be careful of how one conducts the public participation program. This is how it should be done. This is up in Fairbanks, for instance. If you want to establish the vision and find out what people want to address, you say list your 3 top issues and concerns. People will do that in a meeting. And so, for instance, the 250 response sheets, and they said this is what we want, they plan to address. And those dots on the right indicate where the community is today. In other words, how is the community responding to what people want to do today? And the red, of course, is poor, and that yellow is fair. And the idea is that when you're finished the plan, all of those should be turned to green. So what does it cost? Well, here's Fairbanks, and there's the cost, about $60,000. That was fairly high because there weren't a lot of consultants on it. But anyway, here's 14% of the planning budget in Springfield, 16% of the planning budget in Santa Fe, and in Knoxville 13%, and in Lincoln that number. So the purpose behind those slides is to illustrate that you don't have to spend a lot of money on public response for it to be to find out what people want to do. Now, how is it made meaningful? Well, this is an example again. Fairbanks, you say, what are your top issues and concerns? And then you come back with alternatives and you ask people to evaluate them, yes, no, or other. Vote. It's measurable. It's powerful. It isn't arbitrary. Planners can't walk away afterwards and do whatever they want because of what they thought they heard. This is true public participation. Alternatives in response to their vision. And so you can see the number of people that are responding. If you get a split vote, you know you need to do some more work or something isn't working. You know what you can carry forward. Often the rabble-rousers in a meeting, the people who typically often dominate a meeting, think that they're the only ones that their sentiment is everyone else's. When they see this kind of a vote, they're quiet at the next meeting. They understand that they're in the minority. And so here's workshop number 3, refined alternatives, another vote. Here's workshop number 4, where things are settling down, another vote. And so when you carry this kind of information forward to a planning commission or city council, they understand where the public is and that they need to pay attention as well. So, and then implementation rules are important, design guidelines. Portland the developers started to erode our downtown in 1980s. Or in the 70s and 80s, and by the 1990s we had design guidelines to protect our downtown, to protect the built environment, to protect the neighborhood so that things wouldn't be built that would be incompatible with adjacent development. And it's been refined then over the years. We update them from time to time. Retail before is shown on the left, retail on the right with the design guidelines. It's better. Housing before on the left, pretty brutal, and it's improved then substantially on the right. Office before, blank walls, devastating street investment environment, and then you can see it then on the right. Parking structures before were brutal in our downtown, and now, of course, they are good neighbors with active ground floor uses. A guideline states what it is you want to do. There's a description of it. Certain things are encouraged, and certain things are discouraged. You need to say what you don't want, or that is what you will get. Design standards are important. In other words, this informs a private developer, private investment, about your values and how he needs to build in your city, and if he does a set of park blocks, or what are the required dimensions, what's a acceptable building setback where you want active edges, and how much transparency do you need in the walls. Public area requirements are important. That's the public realm, your streets, and the design of your streets needs to be controlled and standardized for all the reasons we just talked about. The tree species is important, the type of furniture, and the detailing of the sidewalks and the intersections. There needs to be a review process that is really solid, and this is a design guideline checklist where a developer can take a one-pager and say, does this guideline apply or not, and if it does apply, is it in compliance? And there is a design review process so everyone understands the pathway they will follow to get a quick decision so that they can move ahead with their project. The fourth element is that any plan needs at this time is a response to the changing world. And there are a number of critical issues that we're all facing. Global warming, rising energy costs. And we have developed what we call mobility-oriented districts in response to many of those issues. And it grows out of a project we did in the late 70s, which was a conservation plan for every sector in Portland, and we realized almost nothing had been done since that time. We took a look at the U.S. energy use by sector, and we said that state actions basically deal with industrial, residential, and commercial, but you can do a lot in the transportation sector. The other three are mostly code issues. Local actions, and so you can get fewer and shorter auto trips. Typical residential district, if we draw a 1 mile radius and that yellow is housing, might look like this. Household auto travel, the U.S. statistics are showing here, 21,000 miles per household. Of course, that means people have more than one car. And those trips we talked about, they're work, shopping, and family, personal, business trips. And people drive out of their neighborhoods then for those trips. And so you get long auto trips to reach those destinations, the business shopping. The model we think that communities should be striving for is shown here. The mobility-oriented district, or MOD, a commercial hotspot within that 1 mile radius, transit serving us so that the red arrows coming in are the auto trips go to that center, and they're also protected bikeways. So that residential needs on the left is balanced by the commercial hotspot, the retail, and the commercial and the jobs in the center. Protected bikeway looks like this, and that means shorter and fewer auto trips with that model. And so there are types of bicyclists, and this is a surveys show that 7% are strong and fearless, enthused and confident. 60%, the rest of us, are capable but cautious, and 33% say no way. And so these are the strong and fearless. And they bike on the street. Paint on the street is a system that is better than nothing. You have paint on the street, we have paint on the street. But the maximum mode split as far as trips, it would be about 10% of all trips. There is no place exceeds this anywhere in the country. The reason being safety. We don't like to bike in these kinds of conditions. So we call paint on the street the 10% solution. And how does one increase that? And well, here's some of the statistics about reasons why people don't bike. A lot has been written about it. It's basically they're afraid to be on the roadway. One looks at how people travel around the country, and you see that our mode split is 1 to 3%, and if you go to the Netherlands or you go to Denmark, it's 30 to 40% on bikes, and you can also see the walking statistic. So the trick then is to figure out how to increase the ridership and up to, say, 40% of all trips. And this is who we need to be able to tie into. And the way to do that, and you want to put these two together, and the way to do that is with protected bikeways. Now, protected bikeways is off the street. You're not biking with traffic. So the parking's on the right here, sidewalks on the left, and there's a protected bikeway. And when you can bike with sunglasses, an iPod, and cowboy boots, you know you're comfortable. And more examples of the kind of people that are biking, and businessmen. even in the reaching out into the suburban areas. And of course, people say, what about rain? Well, use an umbrella. And so that's a 40% solution. It is being built, it is being done in other countries. What are the potential energy savings if you could do that, theoretically? Now here's what we spend now at $4 a gallon. There's just your fuel cost. Other economists use all kinds of other costs on top of it. We're just using fuel here. And you look at then with the kinds of savings, potential savings you'd get with an MOD, you would save a couple of $1,000s a year. The potential transportation energy saving is over 50%. And there is a local economic stimulus. Because instead of putting the money into your gas tank and sending it overseas to the multinationals, you are spending it locally with local merchants for things you need and desire. And that's where the local economic stimulus comes in. And this is a paper was written by an economist in Portland, having to do with less driving, more cash for Portland. And whoop, I whipped over that. So it's all, in the end, this is all about economic development. So the annual economic stimulus for one of these theoretical MODs would be 84, that 1 mile radius would be about 84 million. In other words, that money is staying in the local economy year after year after year. And if we look at your potential, Olympia, $168 million a year economic stimulus, staying in your local economy rather than being sent out of state or out of country. So are there prototypes? Well, in Missoula, we started a prototype, and where you see those yellow lines, they're serving, as are protected bikeways, serving the downtown commercial hotspot. There's a design for what it would look like, where you see that blue, the protected bikeway. There it is, one of the first 3 blocks built in the downtown, the protected bikeway on the inside of the parking. So this has been built. And finally, we're getting to the end of the presentation here. If we take a look at Seattle and we look at the potential for an economic stimulus in the Seattle region, TODs, we are quarter mile radius, transit-oriented development, pretty standard stuff, and we increase those to an MOD with the protected bikeways, the economic stimulus and the increased fare box revenues for 12 MODs is over $1 billion a year.